I'd like a watch that tracks swimming, biking, and running. I could give up mapping on my watch, or a watch that plays MP3s, or a watch that can make phone calls. So today we're looking at what you give up when you go with a simpler watch like the Garmin Forerunner 55. Okay, quick disclaimer here. Garmin did provide me this watch for the purpose of this review, but I don't get to keep this watch. It's actually going back to Garmin, and Garmin isn't sponsoring this video, and the opinions about this watch are completely 100% my own. And Garmin did send me this watch about 3 months ago. So over the past few months, I've been swimming and biking and running with the new Forerunner 55. And so far, I found swimming with it to be, excellent. I would say biking with it was okay, not perfect, and running with the 55 to be, completely adequate for my needs. So you might be thinking, okay, this has got to be a solid triathlon option. But it's really not built for that. It's not designed for triathlon. There is no dedicated open water swimming options on this watch, and there is no triathlon activity type that you can select on this watch. And it's a smaller screen. It's smaller than a lot of the watches on the market. It's only a 1-inch screen with a 208 by 208 pixel display. But with that smaller screen, does come a much lighter weight and overall slimmer design. This watch comes in at a very light 37 grams. It's about 42 millimeters in diameter and 12.5 millimeters in depth. I think for me it sits pretty flush against my wrists. It's definitely one of the smaller and slimmer watches that I've tested on this channel. And the Forerunner 55 does have an optical heart rate sensor, but it doesn't have a pulse ox sensor, meaning it's not gonna give you your oxygen saturation levels. So, if you're training at altitude or you go up and down from different altitudes, that might be something you miss with this watch. A lot of the other Garmin watches will have that. Pretty much anything above this Forerunner 55 would have that pulse ox sensor. Now, you've got a few color options to choose from. The 55 comes in white and black and aqua. You're probably thinking, if it comes in aqua, it must be good for swimming, right? Well, kind of. I do prefer Garmin watches for swimming, especially lap swimming. This watch being light and tight to the wrist means you're really not going to notice it in the water that much. Unlike a lot of the watches that are on the market, Garmin swim modes, it provides stroke detection and drill modes, so you can mix in different strokes into your workout and do drill sets and kick sets, and still get an accurate swim distance at the end of the day. But there's no dedicated open water swimming mode, which I mentioned earlier. One workaround for that would be, doing something like putting this watch underneath your swim cap, or potentially, putting it in a dry bag, like a swim dry bag buoy, and kind of dragging that behind yourself if you use something like that, or really any way that you can kind of find to keep this watch above water so that it can get a good signal. And you can kind of just put it in walk mode or run mode, and you can get your open water swimming distances that way. But what about biking and running? A lot of the higher end watches, can connect to a lot of different biking components like power meters or bike radars. I'd say power meters is probably the big one for me. I was able to use a Connect IQ app on this device to display some of the power meter numbers that I had while cycling with the Forerunner 55, but it's definitely not ideal, and the data didn't kind of make its way into the .fit file. As far as running goes, as a running watch, I found that this has been very solid. You can control your smartphone music with it, but it doesn't have onboard music like some of the other watches that are on the market. It does have a track mode. It has daily suggested workouts. It has Pace Pro. It also has a race predictor tool, so you can kind of estimate what your 5K or your 10K or maybe even your marathon might be. It also has an emergency assistant alert, so if you get hurt on a run or something like that, the watch can use your phone to contact whoever you've set as your emergency contact person. But this watch can't do that without a connected phone, like your Apple Watch might be able to do, or the 945 LTE as a feature. And this watch doesn't have any sort of mapping or any sort of navigation features. So I find myself asking, would this watch work for me? And the lack of a dedicated triathlon mode, it's actually not really a deal breaker for me. For the first few years of doing triathlon, I actually wore the original Garmin Vivo Active. I think it's like a square watch. I think they're on version 4 now, but I did a number of races with it, and I probably did at least 1 or 2 full Ironman events. What I typically would do was just swim without a watch, and then either use a dedicated bike computer or use the watch in bike mode for the cycling section of the race, and then just run as normal. You won't end up with a T1 or a T2 splits, but you do have a ton of pacing and heart rate and potential power information, which is extremely helpful when you're trying to pace yourself in those longer races. And you could easily do the same thing with this Garmin Forerunner 55. You just need to kind of rely on the race results themselves for those swim splits and those transition splits. The other thing that I think that I would really miss about just using this watch would be, potentially open water swimming in those summer months, but some of the small stuff like the sleep tracking widget. It's a small thing for sure, but it's something that I love having on my watch. And don't get me wrong, the Forerunner 55 can track your sleep. It just has to be synced over to your phone for you to see anything. Now, there are a lot of other competitive options on the market. If you wanted to stay within the Garmin ecosystem, there's the Garmin Forerunner 245, which is $300. But in a lot of ways, I actually prefer this Garmin Forerunner 55. It's got fantastic GPS accuracy as well as good heart rate data from this little device. And yes, I might prefer a slightly larger screen. When you jump up to something like the Garmin 745, which has a 1.2 inch screen, and a lot of other stuff like onboard music and Garmin Pay and open water swimming, of course, and triathlon mode. Better compatibility with biking power meters and stuff like that, but you also jump way up in price. The Garmin 745 is $500, but you could also, look at Garmin's older devices. The Garmin 935 is still an excellent option if you're looking for more of those triathlon type features. It's what I use for a few Ironman races as well, and it's got all your standard triathlon stuff, tracking a full race, a very long battery that can go the full distance, even if you're one of the last Ironman finishers in the race. Currently, I'm seeing those cost somewhere between $290 and $320. Other brands with similar price point watches might be something like the Coros Pace 2, which I've talked about on this channel. It's $200 and it's got a full triathlon mode as well as running power. Also, maybe something like the Polar Vantage M2, which is $300. It's a very capable triathlon watch. Personally, I've been a touch disappointed with kind of the brightness of the screen, but I'll leave links to reviews of all of those watches down below in the description of this video, and you guys can check that out if you'd like. And I've talked a lot about, what's missing from this watch, but the truth of the matter is that I really, really like this device, and it's missing a few things that I find useful, but it's a fantastic option at a good price point for anyone looking for a GPS watch. And finally, I'll just remind you guys to get out there and swim, bike, run, rinse, and then repeat it all over again. And we will see you guys in the next one.